Yeah, I have a lot of friends that initially, when I got further and further into my wine education and my wine career, they felt nervous bringing wine to me or having wine with me, and they would always ask about price point and like if it's a good region to get it from. And ultimately, I want to break everything down for everyone. Just honestly, the most important thing about wine is if you like it. It doesn't matter if it's a 95-point wine or a 100-point wine by whoever, like you don't know that person. It matters if you like it. And so it's always something that, comes back to your palate. Everyone's is different. I always ask, especially when I have groups, more than, four people, no one ever agrees on what their favorite is. And that's the thing that's most fun about wine.
Welcome everybody back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I'm your host, Sean Trace, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Megan Koolmees, and I am the DTC Director for Bonovia Winery, a small family-owned and operated winery in Sonoma County. And yeah, I've been in the business for over 10 years, but I feel like I've landed my dream job. I'm really happy.
That's awesome. I want to ask you, how did you get into wine? What took you down this path of getting into the wine world?
I fear it sounds a little pretentious, but I was studying French in college, and one of the
Nice.
requirements for my French major was to live in France. And I moved there when I was 19. I had no experience with wine at all, and I fell in love with what the French call vin de table, just their table wine, really basic. And I decided that I had to make it my life.
That's awesome. I thought you were going to say like to get a French major, you had to learn about wine. And I was like, dude, I should have majored in French in university as well, because that's awesome, but still
Not
also
at the school
cool.
I went to, but that would have been interesting.
Right, right. Well, I wanted to ask you this too, because, as you were getting into this and learning about wine, was there a type, like a varietal or a glass that you just remember? You go, that was the one that kind of got me hooked, or was it just this diverse like types of wine that you were tasting and sampling?
Yeah, I think it was really, like, the culture that surrounded wine, especially in France, and then earlier on when I was asked, especially when I started studying wine, if you were to ask me what kind of wine, I wanted the dirtiest, funkiest, the strange kind of, like, old world style, and I just loved anything that was, like, really unique. I got really into Cab Franc from the Loire, and then as I continued studying and continued in wine, my palate's changed just like everybody does, and now I love really, like, beautiful and, like, gracious, like, Pinot Noirs, but, yeah, earlier on, it was definitely the funkier the better.
That's awesome. I want to ask you about this, like, because for you, you get to be around wine in the business side, but for someone who's never been to a winery, like, what would you want them to feel when the moment they walk in? Because I mean, to me, I grew up around wine country, but I was still really intimidated every time I walked into a winery, and I don't know why. But I found some wineries that were just really welcoming, and I couldn't put my finger on what that was, but I'm curious if you have an idea.
I think that, every winery obviously has, like, their own philosophy around how they take care of guests, how they show up and show their wine to people. Obviously, for me and for where I work currently, like, I want everybody to feel like we are approachable luxury. So
Yeah.
it's a luxury product, everybody kinda knows that right now, but you don't have to dress up to come here and see it, or you don't have to know everything about it. I think that can be really intimidating when people first start because you walk into a place where you wanna have fun, but you feel like everybody around you knows so much more than you do, and,
Yeah.
I think that the most fun about wine is that, like, everybody can start wherever they're at. Everybody has a starting point, and it doesn't you don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the room to have really good community around wine.
I remember I got to I'm part English, and so one summer in university, I went and studied abroad in the UK because I was like, my dad's like, I'd love for you to go see where I grew up. And I went back there. One of the most intimidating experiences was going into the pubs. And I don't know why at the beginning, because they were just down to earth places, but you get in there and it's like that what you described. It's like you think everyone has more of an awareness of the type of experience. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to order? How am I supposed to stand? Am I supposed to lean? Am I supposed to sit? And it's like all of these things that most people don't care about, you know? And I remember going into a wine tasting the first time and I had just seen all these movies. And I was like, do I need to make all these fun faces? Do I need to swish and spit? Do I need to do this? And like, I got in there, and the coolest part is I still remember that one of those first tastings I went on, and the people that were, helping us, guiding us, teaching us about these wines, um, were so chill. They were like so amazingly chill, and I was like, I leaned in, I'm like, "Am I doing it right?" They're like, "Are you having fun?" I said, Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun." "And do you enjoy the
Yeah.
wine?" I said, "The wine's amazing." And they said, "Then everything else is okay. Just let go of the rest. Like, that's all that matters. Are you having fun and did you enjoy the wine? Obviously, don't go and start smashing things and breaking things and being an idiot, but, like, if you're having fun and you're enjoying the wine, like, that's the right direction to be going, you know?"
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that initially, when I got further and further into my wine education and my wine career, they felt nervous bringing wine to me or having wine with me, and they would always ask about price point and like if it's a good region to get it from. And ultimately, I want to break everything down for everyone. Just honestly, the most important thing about wine is if you like it. It doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
a 95-point wine or a 100-point wine by whoever. Like you don't know that person. It matters if you like it. And so, it's always something that, comes back to your palate. Everyone's is different. I always ask, especially when I have groups, more than, 4 people, no one ever agrees on what their favorite is. And that's the thing that's most
Yeah.
fun about wine.
You're right. No one ever agrees, and that is the nice thing, it's like everyone's like, "Well, I like this, I like this." And I think in so many places, we kind of allow for that, but there's, like, this idea of, like, because people feel intimidated by it, but, I mean, if you go to buy a car, no one's gonna be like, "Why did you buy the red one? You should have gotten blue." The people are like, "Okay,
Mhm.
nice car, good for you," you know? But I think
Yeah.
that, like, one of the things too is, like, not so many, some of the experiences I've had at wineries have been really, really, really memorable, but some of them have been just, "Oh, I went there? Yeah, I did that one time." But I wanna ask you this because for me, I have 2 experiences that are so memorable. I went to one winery, and that's a long time ago, but they had all these taiko drums there, and they were playing these taiko drums, and it was this cool festival, and I think it was down near the southern end of St. Helena, and they just had this really cool festival, and it was a long time ago, a long time ago, when a Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes movie was out called Rising Sun. You won't know that because I'm old, but it was a cool movie, and in that movie, they had taiko drums, and it was a really, at that time, and it was the team that did the taiko drums in the movie, and I was just like, I don't know why they did it, but it was a cool cultural experience, and then we had wine with it, and we enjoyed the wine with it, and it was such a cool thing, and I mean, I think I also remember another winery I went to, the cable car ride at Sterling Vineyards, and
Mhm.
that was memorable, not because of the cable car, but because I got to go with my mom, my wife, and my daughter was with us too. She was like, we were all going. She loved the cable car. My mom and my wife were drinking the wine. I was driving. And so we had this great little combination. And my wife and my mom, I've never seen them bond like that before. Like I've been married for 11 years now, but like to see this just fun experience. And my daughter was sitting there looking at these, all of the cool stuff. It was so memorable. And recently I got to go to see another winery that was so awesome, and I made a vlog about it, and it was so cool, but they were unforgettable. But it wasn't just because of the winery, it was because of all of these other components. And I think I
Yeah.
wanna
Wine
ask you about that.
Yeah, wine absolutely does that. I feel like, obviously, it is important what's in your glass 'cause,
Yes.
there there are good wines and there are bad wines to each person's palate, but
Yes.
the experience that's around that, and that experience can be as simple as, like you said, seeing your mom and your wife bond together, or, being in a new region for the very first time.
Yep.
I actually got to go and, travel around France with my mom, and we went tasting in Bordeaux, and it was her first time being in France. It was her first time wine tasting with an experience like that, and so everything about that experience, whether it be, like, the firsts that we were having, the area that we were in, the education that they provided, it was such a memorable experience, and we try to do things here like that too. Like, I like to, obviously, there's an event structure. You have food and wine and music, and that is a very easy event. But we've also done events where we walk people across the entire property tour, where it's like a mile and a half walk, and you just get your hands dirty. You get to see like really where the wine is being grown, and those kinds of experiences that are really visceral. I think those stick with people, and trying to create those experiences around great wine is something that is a lot of fun in terms of the creativity of what I get to do.
Love that. I love that you are the experiential stuff. And I mean, I've been seeing some cool things going on in wineries, like all types of interesting experiential things. Like one place, there was a winery that also had like all of this cool arts and crafts stuff. And I was just like,
Mm.
wow, you get to make these wreaths. There was a winery that I was like telling my wife, I was like, this winery lets you make a wreath, and my wife was like, I love flower arrangement. And she was like so excited about that because it was something that combined what I loved and what she loved. And it was just cool
Yeah.
because it was using some of the old vines, and I think that, it's about the ways that you can make it memorable for people. Give them something they can take home, hopefully bottles of wine, but hopefully maybe there's something else there, beyond just the memories.
Yeah, and, I've been really lucky with the area that we're in, the people that I can collaborate with. We've done paint and sips, we've done,
Yeah, see?
pumpkin carving, we've done, Pilates and wine, and so the space that we have, is absolutely beautiful here. I tell people all the time that the space does a lot of work for us when you look out onto the vineyard, but those experiences is what someone's gonna be like, "I remember the winery that I did yoga at," you know?
I love that. Right? If a winery had puppy yoga, count me in. I wanna try puppy yoga at a winery, but I mean, you never know. But I wanna ask you this too because, um, if you had to explain wine to a beginner, pure beginner, how would you describe what makes one wine different from another?
That's a really good question. I think that when you get into the weeds of it, especially someone who's gone through like really formal education with wine, they can try and get really like nitty gritty with like the soil types and the regions and all of these different things. But if you pull that back, I think that you can compare it to something that a lot of people know. There's Granny Smith apples and there are the Red Delicious apples, and so each one of
Mhm.
those is going to create a different flavor profile. It's going to taste different. It's going to have a different mouthfeel. And that's the same with the different grapes that are being grown. So a different grape going to give you different flavor. It's going to give a different texture. And each one of those things contributes something that's going to show up in the glass.
I love that. Some of what I think is so special is that, I am fascinated still by region, by locale, and how to me, one of the things that I love talking to new people that are new to wine, not new people that are new to wine about is how where you grow the wine is so, so important. How the weather is in that region. That might be like the 1 mile apart can create drastically different wines depending upon well, maybe one's on the side of a hill that's really windy. Maybe one is in this area where there's not as much wind and not as much sun. And like that simple thing can change the quality of the wine. But, I want to ask you this because for people that are outside of the wine industry, like what's something that people think matters about wine that actually doesn't matter that much?
I, hate to say it, but I think legs legs in the glass, while if someone brings that up, I'm like, "Yes, that does have legs." It doesn't designate the kind of quality that people used to think that it designates in wine.
Mhm.
It just has to do with the viscosity, but that's always something that kind of gives me a little bit of a chuckle, and not in a bad way. If that's something that someone sees that they know that they like in a wine, that's wonderful, but it's not, the big quality designator that it used to signify.
I like that because I do think that there are I think that there are still, like, not urban legends, but things people believe that are not necessarily true. I think it's getting better. I think the internet has allowed people to kind of educate themselves, but I I'm a child of the '80s, and one of the things that was fun back then is, like, we would hear songs on the radio, and there would be no YouTube that you could go and listen to the lyrics, and there would be no place that you could go. So, me and so many of my friends, what we thought the song said and what was actually said was completely different, you know? And, you'd listen to it on the radio, and it wasn't until you got the cassette and you could open up, like, the jacket, and you'd look inside of the lyrics, and you're like, "Oh, oh, that's what that means." And I feel like with a lot of different spirits but especially wine, there's a lot of things that people believe, and it doesn't help that there are people out there that try to, like, make it seem, like, a little bit more like, fancy than it can be, Like, some of the psalms that I've had on that were, like, some of the most established, really interesting psalms were, like, a lot of the stuff that people tell you is really, really important is not. Like, what's
Mhm.
really important is taking that wine, sipping it, and, like, you wanna get some more air into the wine, you wanna let it, breathe a bit before you drink it, sure, that's great. There's gonna be different flavors if you do different things, but what's really, really important is sipping the wine and seeing whether you like it or not. And if you're slipping out of the nicest glass on the planet, or if you're sipping out of a cup that is not as worthy, do you enjoy the wine? Like, get to
Yeah.
that core thing, And I think one of the things that to me is so special about wine, and one of the things I love about wineries having tastings is because you go there and you do it with the people you care about. You do it with people that you enjoy. When my wife and I recently went to Gloria Ferrer, where my friend Kyle makes the wine, we were sitting next to this bridal party, and the bridal party was having the time of their life. They were so excited. It was so happy. And we looked over, and it was just joy. And it wasn't just joy because of the wine. The wine was phenomenal. It was joy because they were experiencing the wine together, and that to me is really special, and it leads to my next question because when you're creating events or experiences for people, what are you really trying to give people beside just the wine?
Yeah, again, I think it comes back to how, the what surrounds wine is community, and
Yeah.
it brings people together. It gives you a talking point. It gives you just something that you can all really basically like, break bread together. In terms of events, I really want it to be kind of like we talked about, like, I want it to be an experience that someone walks away with something memorable, and if that is they got to taste a grape off of the vine during harvest, or if they got to, really see the difference between, a Chardonnay leaf and a Pinot Noir leaf on our property. These things that people don't know yet that are different, that are really fun and interesting to find out. I think all of those really, contribute as to, like, why I do different things in different events.
I think that's so interesting too, because I think that some of what gets me and inspires me about wine is that it's a world that I will never know everything. Like, you can be I was just feeling like when I started, like, getting into wine, I was like, I grew up in the Napa Valley. I know." And I suddenly I started talking to people. I was like, "Dude, I know nothing about other regions. I know only about here." And then, like, it's super limited, right? And then I started learning, and I was like and then I live in Southeast Asia, and I was trying to figure out how to buy wine from other regions, and I was, like, looking at French wines, and I was like, "You know what? I don't know anything about French wine." And it was wild for me because as I was looking at French wines, I kept trying to look for varietals. I was like, well, what varietal is this? Is this like a cab? Is this, Chardonnay and stuff? But what I was finding was they don't label the same way. In France, they label more by region. Like, it's like, this is from this region. It's this. And it was really fascinating to me because I was like, I was not aware of how much I didn't know. And I wanted to ask you this next question because one of the things that helped me is that early on, again, I had these great early experiences with people and wineries that were really welcoming. And I want to ask you this about how do you think wineries can do that, and why do some wineries feel really welcoming and fun, and others feel intimidating? What's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, it comes back to a little bit of a philosophical thing in terms of their own company. Some people, they have a philosophy of like, we want to be approachable luxury. So I want people to feel casual, feel welcomed. We have couches that you sit on when you taste here. So we've got people like sinking down into the couches, really enjoying the space. But I've also been to those wineries that are very intimidating. There's a gate, and you need a special code to enter this really beautiful wrought iron gate, and then you drive up the biggest pathway, and then you get there, and everybody's in, like, business formal, like, attire, and so those can feel a little bit more intimidating because the style that they're trying to convey can be a little intimidating, and they're still good experiences, very different on the spectrum. I've also walked into a tasting that's in, the owner's grandma's house, and you're sitting at their dining room table, and I don't think that there's a good or bad to any of these. I think that
No.
it does make going wine tasting so fun and exciting because you have this huge breadth of experiences that you can just walk into, and none of those that I've ever been to have been like, on the highest end and on the most approachable, have ever turned their nose up to somebody going in and trying to learn and trying to experience their property. It just feels a little different when you go.
I love that. Yeah, I've never had, and honestly, I've never had a bad experience wine tasting. I've had places that were more memorable and less memorable. I've had places that were fun and more like fun and less fun, but I don't think I've ever had a bad experience. And I think that that goes to two things. First of all, I think that the person who was speaking with me was really highly trained on how to connect to people and highly trained on how to bridge that gap. And like one of the other things too is I think that the wineries that really get it understand that not everyone knows everything. Some certainly you're gonna have some people who come in and go, "Ooh, I know what this is and I know everything about it." But most people would love to learn. And I come from the background of a teacher. And to me, I think that we can teach people about these wines and help them learn more and learn what's special about it and learn how to like it. And I want to ask you this because I want to ask your perspective now. If you were pouring a glass for me right now, 3 glasses for me, what would you pour? What's your go-to stuff?
Um, I'm very lucky working with Bonovia because I absolutely love everything that we make, and I was a big fan of our wines prior to being here. I would definitely pour, Pinot No well, obviously, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are our bread and butter. Our Tilton Hill vineyard itself is out on the coast, and this kinda speaks to how, small of a distance can make in a wine. The property is less than 10 miles from here, but is so, so much colder than the Russian River Valley that the wines that are coming out of that property are so unique. The
Mm,
Chardonnay and the Pinot, I would definitely feature, and then I always love to pour bubbles for people because, you don't need
that's awesome.
a big, celebration, you don't need a big, circumstance to pop some bubbly and have some fun.
I love that. And I'm a big fan of bubbles because who doesn't love bubbles? They're great. One of the things that I would been wondering too, because it's constantly evolving and for big wineries, they have big budgets and stuff. But for a small winery, you know, if a small winery had no audience at all, or they're trying to get people through the front door, what would you tell them to start doing to get people interested? What are the avenues to drawing people in?
I think that, it's always a good idea to try to put a little bit of stuff on social media. It can feel kind of like you're putting something out into a gap, but there are people that really pay attention to that. And then local partnerships, I think, are the biggest thing, especially for small wineries. So we're a pretty small winery, but those local partnerships are really what can bring people in, whether that's with drivers, because a lot of people coming to the area don't want to have a DD in the group. Uh, Hotels and concierge, but then also we're kind of, at least right now, in the mind of, rising tides. So we actually partner with lots of local wineries to send people back and forth to each other, and word of mouth from someone that works in the industry is really powerful for a consumer. If someone hears from me that I recommend another winery, they trust that I have gone there and I've vetted it and I've tasted it and I actually like it, otherwise I wouldn't talk about them.
I love that, and I think that is it. I think that there's such a power of the network and the community. I, and one of the things too, like, that's where I have a media podcast, a content and media podcast, the Full Battery Media Podcast that's named after my company, conveniently. But one of the things that I find there is I invite a lot of other people on that are doing content and media, and I'm just like, everyone's so afraid of "Oh, why would you invite competitors?" I'm like, "No, they're awesome creatives doing awesome work in the same space, and that's awesome.
Mhm.
Like, why would I you feel threatened?" Like, with wine, like, come on, man. If everyone succeeds, like, the whole industry gets better if we can all get better, you know? It's not this,
Yeah.
like, zero-sum game, so I love that, and I think that for the most part, I think people see that, and they're aware of, like, "You know what? It all gets better if we all are succeeding and having something positive go on." So, you're speaking my
Yeah.
language right now, but I wanna ask you this too because, um storytelling to me is really important in the work that I do in media and content. What kind of stories or moments do people actually remember and talk about after they visit?
I think that, connecting the story to the family, especially for our, winery, it's really important because we still have the same, married couple that, started Bonovia Winery back in 2005, and so connecting
Mm.
to the story, we have, our namesake, Bonovia, is for our owner's father's names. Our estate property that we do our tastings on is named after our owner's mother's, and people really connect with the fact that we're, still kind of almost like grassroots. We're just here, we're doing our best, and we wanna share these wines that we're really passionate about, that the owners were really passionate about enough to start this whole endeavor.
I love that. I think that that foundation is so powerful when you have a story that, anchors people and it comes from somewhere, because to me, I think one of the most powerful things is like I'm a sucker for, like, those backstory things. So, like, if I am watching a movie, I try to read up and figure out, well, what happened to the characters? How do they get into it? Why is that character important? I'm a
Mhm.
bit of a nerd like that. But,
Yeah.
like, that's the beauty of, like, of kind of developing the story, and I think that, if it's a great wine, that's one thing. But if, you go to a place and you show up and you're like, "Yeah, this was in this family's like, they've been making this wine for, 3 generations." That's pretty rad, you know? Like,
Mhm.
you go in and, like, you think about things that survive that long, you know? I think if I think about what my grandparents were doing, I've gone a whole and totally different course. And to think about, like, if my grandpa started a winery and then it was passed down to me and then passed down to or my dad and passed down to me and something I was passing down to my daughter, that would be pretty much one of the coolest things that I could ever imagine. And, to
Yeah, and
hear
those
that,
are
that
hard, like, you don't see those as much anymore because there's a lot of families who the next generation didn't feel as passionate about it, and so then something
Yep,
happens to the winery itself, and so it really being able to connect to that, I think it's important to people.
I think so. And I think that figuring out I had a podcast earlier and we were talking about the wine industry and the guest was talking about the importance of why. Asking why is this important? And it's not just the wine that's important, but why is this experience important? Why is this label important? What's the story there? And I want to ask you this because you've worked your way up in this world, what's something that you learned the hard way that you wished you knew earlier about wine?
About wine specifically?
Or
Oh, man.
anything in life, actually.
I think in terms of the wine world, I there was a lot of preconceived notions that I think I had earlier on about certain varietals or regions, and I wish that I would have just had a more of a blank slate and just kind of walked in and let
Yep,
myself kind of come up with those ideas myself. And, for career-wise, I think that this is a, um, tale as old as time, but, building a team and delegating, is one of the things that I learned the hard
right,
way.
right. I was working with that with my team today. I have kind of a bottleneck in my system, and one of my team leaders, I'm like, "You're carrying everything right now, and we can't do that. You can't do that. You'll burn out."
Yeah.
And so, we had this kind of like support intervention today, and I out the whole team came in and supported her and said, "You gotta give up some of the control. I know you're a perfectionist like me, but it'll make you feel overwhelmed if you kind of hold on to all that, you know?"
100%.
I want to ask you another thing too, because where do you think, and kind of shifting gears away from working with wine, but like learning about wine, where do you think people should go if they want to learn more about wines, and where should they start?
Like you said earlier, the internet has created such a broad network of information that it's pretty easy to look up where do I start learning about wine. But I recommend to anybody that's interested in the process in the regions, generally speaking, WSET Level One, which is the Wine and Spirits Education Trust. Level One is really approachable for any level, and it's something that gives you a beautiful, like, broad perspective on regions, how wine is produced, different varietals, and it doesn't get too intense like, some other certifications with the really intense blind tasting and the service and all of these other things. Level 1 with that, I feel, is something I've recommended to consumers here because it's approachable, you can do it online, and it
Hmm.
gives you kind of a good jumping off point. The Wine Bible is fun. It's a fun book
Yeah.
to read. It does give you really, really in-depth information, but if you're skimming and you're just kinda looking into things that you're most interested in, that's also a fun one to fun read.
I love it. I was like, the thing for me is like, when I started getting into wine, I didn't know where to turn. And like I tried to go, and luckily I had some really cool people in my neighborhood that acted as like mentors, and they were like, "All right, get out and try this. Get out and try this." But it's hard to get out and try stuff when you go to a wine market and you have so many options. That's why I love what you're
Mhm.
talking about, because you gotta have the ability to start somewhere, and I think one of the things that's overwhelming about wine, and I mean, not just wine, I would say microbrews are the same thing. When you go into that selection, you're just like, "Oh my goodness, like, what do I pick? Where do I start?" Because also it can be something that is not as forgiving if you're going to like, okay, this is $100. Well, do you buy that every couple of days? Where do you start? And I want to think that what I like to think is that, and what I want people to understand is that there are people out there. If you go and find a great wine shop, ask them questions. Ask them where to start. And like, that's why I like to ask that question of where do you think people should start? Because in
Yeah.
what glasses would you pour? Because so getting a foot in the door. And I think that bubbles are a great way for people to get their foot in the door. It's something, who doesn't like bubbles?
Yeah. I that and also one of the things that I did when I was really early on, especially in studying, and this translates to someone who just already knows something they like. So, let's say the person is really big fan of Sauvignon Blanc and they wanna learn
Yeah.
more about it. With a couple friends, go to the store and buy Sauvignon Blanc from 4 regions. Get
Yes.
a California, get a New Zealand, get a French, get South Africa, and go take those with your friends and bag them up, try them all without knowing what's in the glass, and pick which one you like and then learn more about that region. I think that that's a really fun way to without a lot of knowledge about soils and climates and all of those things, that's just flavor in the glass. I think that's a fun way to do it.
I love that too. I think that it's really easy to learn that way too because you kind of focus in on one area. Because if you try to get everything all at the same time, it can be really overwhelming. Like, you're just like,
Yeah,
"What am I supposed to focus on?" Because if I'm focusing on this, I I was trying to, like, and I think that was one of the things that overwhelmed me. I remember doing a wine class, and I was like, "Oh, it's cool. I understand some about wine." So I studied all these different varietals, and then I went to the supermarket. I mean, supermarket in St. Helena has a ridiculous little wine selection,
of course.
Safeway, it's ridiculous. I go in there and, like, I was like, "Wow, wow." And I'm just looking at just the cabs, and I just was like, there's like 150 different cabs in there, and I was just like, "Where do I start?" And I think that what I love that what you say is, like, go in and start taking that. One of the things that I do, and I haven't talked about this yet, I love using a ChatGPT to talk about the wines I love. And I'm
Yep.
like, I've been talking to ChatGPT and I'm like, all right, this is what I enjoy. And I'll be like, all right, I had a new wine today and I liked it. And I want to try to figure out why. And I'm trying to create these patterns and look at like what are the things that chart it out. And so I've learned very clearly from analyzing with my AI friend that
Yeah.
I like more mellow reds and that there are certain types. I am not a huge fan of super bready type of whites. Like I'm not a huge fan. And the cool part is then that's allowed me to start going, all right, well, what are some different things I could try? And I get out there and I'm like you're doing it like you said and going, "Alright, let's try a couple different regions,
Yeah.
see what they taste like." And some of them I'm like, "Yes," and some of them I'm like, "Not as much."
I think that's smart because it can really distill the information down. It can search from so many different sources and sites and pick out what you're tasting as long as you can describe kind of generally what you're tasting. I think that's a great tool. I've heard a lot of people too that are newer into wine that I see and talk to, using Reddit because they
Oh, yeah.
trust certain Redditors. They trust certain people who talk about things in a certain way, and so finding their own trusted source kinda leads them to what they wanna try and experiment with.
I love that. I love that's a great idea. I didn't even think about Reddit, but that's a great way. I gotta go check out the Reddit, threads. I love going into wine shops and I'll take a picture real quick and throw it into ChatGPT and go, this is the price. What do you think about this? Is this a good deal? And it's like, yeah, it's a steal. And I'm like, I'll take two of those, And so I've been having fun exploring and looking. But the cool part is, and what I'm trying to get at, whether it be Reddit, whether it be using AI, through ChatGPT or something. And I know there's some AI apps that talk about wine. I don't know much about them, but using tools now to get out and find out more information. And I think that it's such a great time to get information and to feel less intimidated. And
Mhm.
ask a question before you go in. Am I supposed to spit? Am I supposed to swirl? What's the correct way? I remember once, like, I lived in Vietnam and there was this huge debate online, and all of these people were arguing because one celebrity had held the wine like this, and then another person was said you're supposed to do it like this, and someone else was holding the bottom, and then, and there was this huge debate, and it got like pretty crazy. And my wife looked at me, and all of her friends were like, "What's the correct way? You're from wine country," and I was just sitting there going, I have no idea. I literally don't know. I mean, I've seen people do everything. I go to the wine tasting. Some people like this, some people like this, some people are holding from the bottom. And is there a right way? Probably is. I'm sure that there's a wine expert that's watching right now going, Sean, of, of course there is. I don't know it.
I'm sure that I know that there's a proper way, but I think that, again, what I try to approach these kinds of conversations with is just an education back, you know? So, if you wanna hold the base of the glass and you feel comfortable holding the base of the glass, that is fine, that's how you feel comfortable. Your hand is gonna warm up the wine in that glass, but if you're okay with that, then that's the way you hold your glass. It's the same. If you want to do the 5 S's of wine tasting where you see, sniff, swirl, spit, all of the things, that's fine, and you probably will have a better palate by the end of a full day of wine tasting if you're spitting things out. But if you want to keep tasting and you have a designated driver specifically, then have fun, you know?
Yep. I 100% agree. Yeah. My wife and I, we went wine tasting and I was like, yeah, I was like, "We're taking Ubers today." And it's like, "Why? Last time you drove." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I wanna enjoy the wine this time. You guys got to enjoy the wine last time, and I'm gonna enjoy it this time." So, we took an Uber, and it was wonderful. But, I mean, the cool
Yeah.
part is now there's so many other options too for rides and stuff, and I know there's some
Mhm,
wine tours. There's just options, and I think that that's what people need to realize is, like, if you wanna learn, if you wanna try something new, get out and have some fun. And
mhm.
the experience is gonna be awesome if you do.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people I can't speak for everybody in the industry, but I think that a lot of people are trying to meet the consumer where they're at. So, if that's partnering with a driver in town that's going to recommend you to all of their guests, or if that is, lowering the barrier for entry, making a more casual tasting rather than the very formal one, like, just trying to, like, meet the consumer where they're at in their wine journey.
I love that because there's never a wrong option, you know? But the worst option is if someone doesn't try something and they sit there and they're just intimidated to start. And I think that's a great thing to help people get their foot in the door. And
Mhm.
I see this with martial arts and stuff. Or even the gym. You see the videos of the gym where someone shows up at the gym and they don't know what they're doing, and people go, "Look at this guy, he doesn't know how to use it." But the reality is most gyms you go in, they're gonna be like, "Dude, welcome." And if you're doing it wrong, most people are not gonna laugh. They're gonna be like, "Hey, you want some help? You might wanna try this." And I think that most wineries are gonna be like that. Most wine experiences and most people who love wine are gonna I have met and even in this podcast and other areas, I think I've only met one wine snob. And it was not with this podcast. It was when I worked at a winery many, 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 many years ago. And that's the only time I've ever met someone who I would consider a wine snob. And it was just like,
Yeah.
hung up on themselves. But 99.999% of the other people have been so chill. And they're just like, dude, I love it.
Yeah.
You can love it too.
Exactly, and that's, one of the things that I like so much about hosting people and just chit-chatting about wine because I love it so much, and if I can get somebody, who finds the wine that sparks it for them, I think that's really exciting. I had a group within the last month who came in, and they just said, we don't wanna drink red wine, we only drink Chardonnay. We're lucky we have a lot of Chardonnay, so I was like, "Okay, just forget the menu that's in front of you. I'm gonna go open 5 Chardonnays, and we're just gonna taste that." And by the end of the tasting, and after hearing me talk about the wines the way that I did, they were like, "Okay, you really like Pinot, so we wanna try 1 Pinot. If we're just gonna try one of them, can we do that?" And then they tried it, really loved it, and bought it. And so trying to again, it's a meeting people where they're at. They saw how passionate I could be about our white wines and showcasing those to their palate, and then they're like, "Let's just try something, one more thing."
I love that. I think that that's I remember that I showed up at a winery and I was hell bent on I'm a red guy. I like reds. I grew up with reds. Reds is where I came from. Red, 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 red. And someone's like, "All right, man, try this rosé." And I was like, "I am not gonna like this." God, that is good, And then they were like, "All right, try this white." I was like, "My wife knows I am not a white drinker. I do not like whites. This is not my cup of." That is delicious. And I was just like, it caught me off guard, but like I needed someone who could help me get out of my comfort zone per se. And I think that that's what the best, people that are hosting and giving these great experiences do. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Where can people go to find out more about you and what you do and also the winery?
Yeah, so if you go to bonoviawinery.com, we have a discover page that gives you all the information about everyone on our team, including myself. And that's the best way to find me, find the winery, check out our experiences. We really have something for everyone. I think that, every winery obviously has, like, their own philosophy around how they take care of guests, how they show up and show their wine to people. Obviously, for me and for where I work currently, like, I want everybody to feel like we are approachable luxury. So, it's a luxury product, everybody kinda knows that right now, but you don't have to dress up to come here and see it, or you don't have to know everything about it. I think that can be really intimidating when people first start because you walk into a place where you wanna have fun, but everybody you feel like everybody around you knows so much more than you do, and, I think that the most fun about wine is that, like, everybody can start wherever they're at. Everybody has a starting point, you know? And it doesn't you don't have to be the most knowledgeable person in the room to have really good community around wine. Yeah, again, I think it comes back to how, the what surrounds wine is community, and it brings people together. It gives you a talking point. It gives you just something that you can all really basically like break bread together. In terms of events, I really want it to be kind of like we talked about, like, I want it to be an experience that someone walks away with something memorable, and if that is they got to taste a grape off of the vine during harvest, or if they got to, really see the difference between, a Chardonnay leaf and a Pinot Noir leaf on our property. These things that people don't know yet that are different, that are really fun and interesting to find out. I think all of those really, contribute as to, like, why I do different things in different events. And that's, one of the things that I like so much about hosting people and just chit-chatting about wine because I love it so much, and if I can get somebody, who finds the wine that sparks it for them, I think that's really exciting. I had a group within the last month who came in, and they just said, We don't wanna drink red wine, we only drink Chardonnay. We're lucky we have a lot of Chardonnay," so I was like, "Okay, just forget the menu that's in front of you. I'm gonna go open 5 Chardonnays, and we're just gonna taste that." And by the end of the tasting, and after hearing me talk about the wines the way that I did, they were like, "Okay, you really like Pinot, so we wanna try 1 Pinot. If we're just gonna try one of them, can we do that?" And then they tried it, really loved it, and bought it. And so trying to again, it's a meeting people where they're at. They saw how passionate I could be about our white wines and showcasing those to their palate, and then they're like, "Let's just try something, one more thing." Yeah, I have a lot of friends that initially, when I got further and further into my wine education and my wine career, they felt nervous bringing wine to me or having wine with me, and they would always ask about price point and like if it's a good region to get it from. And ultimately, I want to break everything down for everyone. Just honestly, the most important thing about wine is if you like it. It doesn't matter if it's a 95 point wine or a 100 point wine by whoever, like you don't know that person. It matters if you like it. And so it's always something that, comes back to your palate. Everyone's is different. I always ask, especially when I have groups, more than, four people, no one ever agrees on what their favorite is. And that's the thing that's most fun about wine.